My name is Zane Corey. This is my camera shop. Maybe you've seen some of my other videos, blog videos. They take about 3 hours to make, about an hour to shoot, 2 hours to edit. I enjoy doing them in the evenings. I repair cameras full-time each day, and that's what I do during the daytime. And this video is to show you my tutorial style. Most of the videos I've seen on YouTube that show camera repair just have a camera dead overhead shooting down at the desk, and the repairman says, okay, now do this, do this, do this. They bore me to death. With my tutorial videos, the camera angle changes, I change, I stutter, I tell you what to do and not to do and why. Anyway, so this video you're going to see my style of tutorials. This is a pitch for Patreon. If I can get enough supporters on Patreon, I can cut back on my repair hours each day, or even close my shop and work on making tutorials. And so this video is to show you my style of teaching or tutorials. You may hate it, you might like it. It's not very long. It took me 3 days to make it. I couldn't believe it. I knew tutorials were going to be hard to make. I didn't know they were going to be that hard. But compared to my little vlog videos, they're really work. So anyway, go ahead and look at my tutorial sample and see if you like my work. Consider supporting me on Patreon or some other way. I have considered using paywalls such as Gumroad or PayHip. And maybe we can figure out some way that I can cut back on my repairs or stop repairing and make these tutorials. I think they would be very beneficial to the film camera community. I don't know that anybody else is making them. And anyway, let's look at the video and see what you think. This is the Viewfinder cage, and it needs to be cleaned. There can't be a speck of dust inside it when I start. When you reassemble a viewfinder, the first thing you'll always start with is a screen. Screen usually sits at the bottom. It has a pattern embedded onto it. And unfortunately, the screen is where the debris shows up. A piece of lint, a piece of cotton, a speck of dust. It's not obvious when you are just looking at it, holding it in your hand. But once it's installed into the camera and you're looking through the viewfinder, it will show up very obviously, and you'll have to disassemble the viewfinder and clean it. Most of the stuff can be just blown out with air, and that will take care of it. Occasionally you have to clean the screen with a cleaner. I use naphtha quite often. But you have to be careful with cleaners because they will damage the screen if you use the wrong thing. And once you get the screen clean, you hold it by the edges. If you grip it any other way, you'll get your fingerprints on it. On the Nikkormat, there is a notch on the left-hand side, or if you've got it upright, it'd be on the bottom. And the speed scale goes into that notch. So when you're looking through the viewfinder, you can see what speed your camera is shooting at. So you drop it in like that. You can't really get it any other way because you can't grip it. So you have to drop it inside. So once it's dropped inside, then you get a loop and check it again to make sure there's no lint or debris on the walls or on the screen, because the next thing you're going to put in is a spacer and the glass over it. And then once you do that, you won't be able to get to it. It's locked away. And so you have to be very careful with this step. The next thing I install is a spacer. It's a rectangle, it's metal, has a small window on the bottom of it, which goes over the speed scale. The speed scale is open at the bottom, and if you look through the viewfinder, you would see all the speeds at once. So this spacer has a small box in it, so you only see one speed at a time. So if you set the camera for a 30th of a second, that's all you'll see is a 30th of a second. But the spacer's main function is to protect the screen from the glass lens we're fixing to put in. My hands are moving around quite a bit there. This is the first time I've actually serviced a camera while recording, and my hand is just all over the place. I should have put some blocks under my hand to keep them more steady. There I'm trying to show you the little window on the bottom, not doing a very good job. And the camera's not in focus. This is my first try. I'm sure as I get a little more practice I'll be better at it. The next thing you'll be putting in is the glass lens. It's flat on the bottom, curved on the top. It also has to be touched just by the edges or you'll leave fingerprints. And this is a critical moment. You're now closing the gap between the screen and the glass, and there's no way to get in there. If you accidentally trap a piece of lint or cotton fiber or something in there, it'll show up on the screen. But then you'll have to disassemble the viewfinder and do this all over again. And I have many times, because you can't see it until you put in the prism and look through it. And it's always kind of a dangerous moment, but it's also, the viewfinder now is 90% done, so you can continue on to installing the prism. The next thing I'll be installing is the spacer, or a stand for the prism. It's fairly thick, 1/4 of an inch. Has a notch there in the bottom that the speeds show through when the customer's looking through the viewfinder. And I shouldn't be using my finger on this, but I feel fairly safe at this point. The screen and the glass were the dangerous part. This part here is the easy part. Still, I could have some particles in between the screen and the glass and not know it yet, but I will find out shortly. The next thing we'll be installing is the prism. It's not particularly dangerous, but the glass that we're looking through now on the bottom have to be absolutely clean. If there's any dust or any lint or anything at all in there, you won't see it. It won't be sharp, but it'll be blurred. And you'll see a blurred area on the screen as you're looking through the camera. Prism just presses in. This is a point where I'm almost done. I still got to put on the eyepiece and then look through the eyepiece to see if any dust or lint got between the screen and the glass when I was installing it. If there is any in there, there's a screen there, looking through the bottom. If there is any lint or dust or anything in there, I will have to take everything apart and redo it, which seems simple, but there's always a danger of damaging something, and it's very nerve-wracking installing a viewfinder. The next thing to be installed is the eyepiece. There's the circuit board on top, photocells left and right, glass in the center. That glass also has to be cleaned on both sides, and it does get dirty, especially on the outside, customer side. And that's the trouble with viewfinders, is that everything else has to be spotless. The eyepiece, the prism, the screen, the glass on top of the screen, and you're in a constant battle with static electricity. Static electricity is not that bad of a problem when the shop is cool or damp in the winter, but in the summer when the air is hot and dry, static electricity will constantly draw in lint, dust out of the air right onto the surface. And it always seems to do it while you're assembling it, never while you're cleaning. So you don't really see it until the very end when you've assembled the viewfinder and you look through it and you see a piece of lint got drawn in. You don't know when, and it's on the glass. Sometimes it just sticks to the walls, and then when you're putting the camera back together later, maybe an hour later, a day later, the lint will move to the screen. The screen, more than anything, will draw in lint and dirt onto it. Static electricity is very strong there. Finally, something simple. The prism has a mirror coating there on top, and you need to put this little piece of plastic on top to protect it, so when you install the prism spring holder, it doesn't scratch it up. You can see there it just presses down and slides under the eyepiece there, the circuit board. Next we got to, I've got to install the prism spring holder. The prism, as you remember, is just sitting in there. Nothing's holding it in there except for that eyepiece, and that's not tight. It's just keeping it from falling out. To keep it in there tight so it does not move, you use this holder that Nikon made. That's a little aluminum clip there on top, springs on left and right side. Works real good, kind of a pain to install because the springs are under a tremendous amount of tension and they are short. You can't use your fingers. You have to use tweezers. And quite often the tip of the tweezers will slip and the spring will fire across the room, and then I've got to go look for it. That actually happened while I'm installing this. You'll see a break in the film where I had to stop the camera and go get another spring and install it. There's a break right there. And there's the new spring that I went and got. And you can see put it there on the clip. And now that's in place. It's a good system. I've never seen one of these prisms come loose. And the last thing I need to do to this viewfinder is install these tabs. There you go on the left and right side. I'm not sure why Nikon installed these on the camera. The spring holder on the top has more than enough tension to hold the prism in place. But that's the way Nikon is. They overdo it sometimes. Like they seal the screws with sealant when they put them in, which is a headache for a repairman to get out. The tabs, you don't want to actually press them against the prism or it might crack it. But you do press it up against plastic to hold the prism in place. As near as I can figure, it's because maybe the customer might drop one, hopefully on the grass. And these tabs will keep the prism from moving, and along that with the spring holder. And that's what I think their purpose is. This has been my first voiceover video. It was 3 times more work than the other kind. Didn't like it very much. It's much more thorough. When you're voiceovering, you can add a lot of little small content. It would be good for tutorials. But as far as making videos for fun, I don't know if I'm going to make any more with voiceovers. It's hard. And so that's pretty much it. The viewfinder is all assembled now. I had to install it twice. You can't see it here and you can't look through it, but there was a speck of dust inside that I had to get out. So all that's work that I've shown you, I had to undo it, go back in, blow it out with air, and redo it a second time. But that's just the way it is. That's the camera business for you. So I hope you enjoyed watching how I did this, and this is pretty much it. There's a screen inside, nice and clean. Viewfinder's all put together. I'm always glad when the viewfinder's done. Got to get that spring back in place, and of course I would do it off camera. Hard to repair and watch with the camera shooting at.